But get a load of this. Legendary Jim Gilliam in the studio. Okay. Jim, sometimes we say friend of the show. Jim couldn't be more of a friend of the show. He helped set this up, etc. He's the founder of 3DNA. He makes internet tools to fix a broken system. How's that? Was that good?
That's good. That's good.
Okay. Now, but what we're going to do is we're going to have a friendly debate because he claims that he's in favor of unschooling. And Jim, let me start right off the bat by saying, not buying it. Okay, I don't even believe that you can believe that. I don't believe you're going to make an argument for unschooling. Go.
So my background is I've been like a educational lab experiment personally. Like, I've been in every different situation, right? So it started out in public school as very young. I've been in private Christian school. I was homeschooled. I was unschooled. I've been to high school. I got a GED. I've been to college. I've basically seen everything. So my personal life really isn't necessarily a good example of what would happen to somebody who's unschooled, but I sort of have sort of an interesting perspective on it, right? Mm-hmm. So the way to think about it is, one, there's a difference between radical unschooling and unschooling. You've done a really good job at explaining the difference between homeschooling and unschooling, right? Mm-hmm. They're actually extremely different. Right. But the radical unschoolers are kind of like the Lyndon LaRouches, right, of the unschooling movement. I mean, they're just nuts, right? And the Good Morning America piece really focused on that to try to kind of undermine a lot of the efforts there, right? But it's really important for the TYT audience, who's very smart, to like not take a lot of the mainstream sort of interpretations of this stuff to heart. So okay, so the argument for it, right? The way to look at it, I think, is what is the purpose of education, right? The purpose of the educational system that we created, right, is to make the corporations and government were very concerned in the sort of mid-1800s that there weren't going to be enough factory workers. There weren't going to be people smart enough to man the machines, right? And they created a system very much modeled on this factory, right? And you look at the educational system, it's factory, treats everybody the same, right? And you go through this process and out, you're supposed to like then be able to be good workers, right? But the goal that we think about in education is, how do we make children successful? How do we grow people up so that like they're able to be functioning, successful members of society? And there's the established way of doing that is sort of really well known. You go to school, you go to college, you get a job, stuff like that. Problem is that's all breaking down, right? It's like, my sister did it, right? And she went to Berkeley. She got really good at sort of regurgitating facts to do well on tests. She got really good grades. Right, and she comes out and like nobody wants to hire her, mm-hmm. right? And there's a different way of doing it, right? And sort of as an individual, and this is what unschooling really makes possible, is that the hardest thing to do to be successful in life is figuring out what you love doing, mm-hmm. right? This is the single most important thing, right? And people don't even start thinking about that generally until they're like out of college, because they're so obsessed with like going through this system, right? This factory line system, and everybody's told them that to be successful, you have to do this, right?
All right, let me jump in there, Jim, because it's funny that you mentioned that, because I'm the perfect case study for what you're talking about. I went through the system, and I was basically a professional student, right? Well, they told me, okay, you got to get good grades. My dad beat that into my head, right? And sometimes quite literally, but it's okay. I still love you, Dad. And I did. I got good grades. I went to a good college. And then coming out of college, I didn't know what to do. My dad's like, go to law school. I was like, okay, I'm good at that. So I went and did that. And then I came out, and I had no freaking idea what to do, right? I had to go to like learning annex classes to try to figure out, etc. But despite all that, I still got a fundamental education that wound up being enormously helpful in other ways, okay? So, for example, I'm not good at science. I'm just not, okay? And that's why we needed your help, okay? And I've never done physics, and I've never done chemistry in my real life, okay? But it helps to know physics and chemistry. I mean, it makes you a more well-rounded person. It certainly helps tremendously to know biology. I mean, but I can throw you 100 examples.
Sure. Right.
Do you see what I'm saying by that? So if I had just gone to become a talk show host from the time I was 16, that would not have been the right way to go, even though that's what I love and even though that's what I wound up doing. Go.
So I would argue that the base level of knowledge that somebody has to have is decreasing dramatically, right? I actually don't know biology. The only reason I know any biology at all is because I got cancer, right? And I had to they had to explain it to me.
Your company
right?
is called 3DNA. You have to know some biology.
That's how I figured it out, right? No, so and like I don't know, I hate chemistry and physics. I get the whole lever thing, but that's about it, right? So like the reality, the base level of knowledge I think is much simpler, right? It's reading, writing, arithmetic. And I think there's a fourth thing that's really important now, which is understanding how to use the internet, right? I think it's Google, right? Because we've shifted from having to learn and remember facts and regurgitate them, have all of our knowledge in our head, into being able to pull all this information together at our fingertips. And that's something that sort of I'm really good at because I grew up, right, in that environment where it was, and I have the ability, it seems almost kind of magical to a lot of people, but like I can figure out just about anything really quickly, right? And that's the kind of skills that we need. And so like as a child, right, the sooner that you can figure out what you love doing, right, you'll have the chance to get really good at it and be really successful, right? And for me, it happened sort of just because like I wouldn't listen to anybody else and I just wanted to use the internet all the time. Well, let me explain. Like 20 years ago, like using the internet all the time was like considered ridiculous, and you're wasting your life, right? And you're not going to amount to anything,
right?
But I was obsessed with it, and so I got really good at it, right? And there's a lot of research now that shows that, right? That if you spend a lot of time on something that you really love, like you get up in the morning and I really love doing this, then you'll get really good at it. And the society has gotten to the point where you don't have to be good at every single little thing. You've got to be specialized.
I hear you, and I have one good argument against that and one devastating argument against it. But hold.
Okay,
I
want to
let
say
Anna
something.
jump in. Yeah.
So the one thing that bothers me about unschooling is they say that the main element is you spend time with your parents and your parents play with you and you explore. You go to the park and you learn about plants and you learn about this. And it's sort of learning through everyday experiences and everyday life. The thing that bothers me about that is it doesn't expose you to enough. For instance, how are you going to learn about history if you're going to the park with your parents, learning about plants and things like that? I mean, how does that conversation come up? How does it organically happen? And that bothers me because if I were unschooled, I think I wouldn't know that I was interested in history or interested in politics, because that type of conversation doesn't organically come up in my household. And I'm just using myself as an example. In other households, maybe chemistry doesn't come up, and other math, other subjects don't come up. So,
whereas in the Kasparian household, they couldn't stop talking about chemistry at the dinner table.
No, but I'm saying like it differs from one household to another. So if you're not organically exposed to that type of topic, how do you know that it's something you're good at or it's something that you're interested in?
Actually, the reality is because that's such an obvious thing to be a problem, they go overboard in the other direction. They provide all kinds of opportunities for their kids to learn this stuff. See, if you're willing to actually take your kids out of public school, right, and be responsible for teaching them, that's like already 90% better, right, than most of parents involved in. And so what happens is they actually really care. And so there's a lot of, so what you'll see is, like for instance, my parents, we were always going to like different locations. We lived in North Carolina, right? And so we would go to Williamsburg, we would go to all these different places, and we got sort of firsthand experience, what we would call field trips that happen maybe once a year. We did all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And so here's the thing, right? Say like that you want, it's like you want to expose children to a lot of different things, right? And make those things fun. Right now, you expose children to a certain number of things in our educational system, and you make it boring as hell, right? You give them textbooks, and it sucks. And they look at this, and they're like, I don't want to do any of this, right? So what if you did instead, right? You say, okay, let's take the kids, instead of giving them a biology textbook, let's go and we'll show them, a surgeon working and like doing a heart transplant, right? But some kids are going to go and they're going to be grossed out. Right, other kids are going to go and they'll be, that's the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen, right? And they're going to spend the rest of their life, right, going on and trying to figure out how they can be a surgeon.
Right.
Right.
Well, okay, I kind of see that as homeschooling because you're directing your children toward one thing or another. Okay, but another thing is, why can't there be a hybrid of both? I mean, isn't that what good parenting is? You know, your child goes to school, yeah, but you also go and you explore with your child after school, and you take them to places that they find interesting. If you have a hybrid of both, don't you think that would be more effective?
I actually really believe in hybrid approaches in this. What ends up happening in unschooling is that parents become more facilitators. Right, you know, they're trying to figure out sort of what their kids are interested. They may suggest things, right? You know, one of the things that I think is a really effective tactic or tool is to provide kind of like a game type of system for trying out new things. Where, because, you know, I actually went through this process as I got a little bit older, right? I was like, you know, I'm not exactly sure that I want to keep doing this whole tech thing, and so I forced myself to go, and like anytime some opportunity came up, I would just go do it. No matter how, the more ridiculous and something that I would normally do, I would do it. So I was in Alaska camping in the middle of nowhere, right? I was a model, right? which is ridiculous, right?
Well, what did you model?
They took pictures of me. People with photographers, they liked me for some reason, and I hated it. It was awful, right? But Alaska was awesome. Right.
Okay.
So, you know, but there's, you know, those types of things are fun, right? And right now, the way kids are exposed to things is boring, right? And then we wonder why they sort of they tune out and they don't want to go to school and all these other things. If you make that fun, and it's not hard to do.
See, Jim, your best point is that if you bother to take your kids out of the public education system, you're actually not lazy. Because if you were lazy, you just let them do what everybody else does, right? And so you care. And if you care, you're going to parent usually much better than if you don't. And I like that you dismissed the radical unschoolers, which just lets them sit there and play video games all day long from the beginning. So, all right, well, that's much more of a conversation. But I loved Anna's points, and I wanted to add that, look, you got some schooling in the beginning as a base, so that makes you a little different than the average unschooled person who did not get that base.
Which I support. Actually, there should be, right, some base level of stuff, but I think that happens in a few years. It can happen extremely fast.
You think like elementary school?
At max, right? You really,
Wow.
right. The fact that we spend so much time, right, sort of teaching kids like really basic stuff is insane, right? You can plow through this stuff really fast. The other problem, of course, is that some kids learn faster than others. Right, and that's sort of well established.
Well, that gets to my devastating point, right, which is that, Jim, I know you, and you're bored. I don't know if it's a little awkward to call you a genius because you're sitting right here, but but I mean, you're at the very least borderline genius. So yeah, if I was going to unschool your ass, it's easy. All right, go, genius, figure it out. Okay, no. But what if you got a kid who isn't that motivated or who isn't that bright? Well, I mean, I don't want to say not bright, but just, you know,
that don't have that natural curiosity.
So
okay?
here's the devastating piece on that, right? I'm actually not that smart, right? I'm smart enough, right? And here's the thing: I would bet just about everybody in the TYT audience is smart enough. The problem is they haven't found what they haven't found.
I'm kidding.
They haven't found what they love doing. As soon as you find what you actually really love doing, you will get extremely good at it because you won't want to do anything else. Right, and the sooner you do that, the better chance you have of being successful.
I hear you, and look, did you read Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell?
Absolutely.
He makes a very similar case, and we've talked about some articles here where you just have to be at about 115 IQ, right? And then the geniuses don't really help you beyond 115 IQ. You don't have to be at 115, but if you are, you're basically smart enough to do anything. Okay, and be as successful as anyone could be. So I hear what the case you're making, but what you need more than that, and what you have in abundance, and what a lot of people don't have, is intellectual curiosity. And if you don't have a kid with intellectual curiosity, then you got George W. Bush, and then you unschool his ass, and then you got a world of hurt.
But see, this is what I think happened. I think because of this environment, it made me intellectually curious, right? See, the problem, right, I think that's actually like a nurture kind of thing, not a nature thing. And the problem is that kids are put through an education system where all of that's sucked out of them. There's no opportunity for that kind of intellectual curiosity, for the fun part of learning to actually come out. And that wasn't pulled out of me, right? And I think that was the sort of the big advantage that I had. And so what I want is I want to dramatically cut down on all the boring stuff that you have to do. Right, and get kids exposed to as many things in a fun, interesting way. I mean, imagine schools where kids had access to resources and teachers who were really good at particular things, and they got to choose where those were happening. Not when they get to college, right, where they have to take specific things to major, but early on, like middle school.
All right, we're out of time, so I'm going to declare that we have a tie.
Yes.
Okay, because look, honestly, I thought he had no chance. Okay, but he had a passion for this debate, and so that made him better at it. So the reason I'm saying a tie is, look, I basically the conclusion you guys came to. You need some sort of hybrid. I mean, I don't say just put them in a factory, public education, just go. Don't go on any field trips. Don't, you know, I'm not for rote learning either. But I think you need to teach them the fundamentals. And then I would do 80-20, 80%, fundamentals and 20%, hey, let's have fun and figure out what you're interested in. Whereas right now we're about, 98-2 in our system. So we'll shake on it. Okay. So that's the situation. Thanks for coming in, Jim. It was a great conversation. Jim.